Okay, now it is monopolistic competition. So this is actually a hybrid of monopoly and competition. So if I can remind you here, monopoly is the case where you are facing a consumer, a demand, a body of consumers with a certain level of inelasticity, so that you can have a monopoly power. And competition in the long run, it is that price equals to marginal cost, and all firms break even in the long run. Okay, so here I would say monopolistic competition is exactly as it's named, starting from monopoly, ends up with competition. Okay, so let's look at its definition. It's defined as market in which firms can enter freely, each producing its own brand version of a differentiated product. So here it is the first difference to competition, competitive market. In competitive market, all products are homogeneous, generic products. Okay, so here monopolistic competitive market has two key features. One is differentiated products. Okay, so those products are highly substitutable for one another, but not perfect substitutes. In that sense, there are certain brand effect, right? What does that mean? For instance, Apple, Android, we have those phones, right? Especially Android phone has a lot of different brands, right? Those phones are substitutable pretty much, but there are certain people who are specific to a certain phone, and they would only accept certain phone. In that case, it is those phones are close substitutes but not perfect. Okay, and the entry and exit is pretty free. That doesn't mean that everybody can, you know, open up a phone producing company, but still there are pretty many phone producing companies to enter into the market to especially if they see a good promising opportunity of making profit in this industry. Okay, so let's look at this monopolistic competition by looking at the phone, the evolutionary path of the phone. Okay, so we started with Motorola and Nokia, these two dominating the market when the phone was first invented and when the phone was in the shape of bricks. And later on, we enter into the world of smartphones. Apple and Android, those are two key dominators, right? Especially Apple, iPhone 3, iPhone 4, proud products of Steve Jobs, right? Those were pace paving, defining a new era of phones. But later on, we have Android coming in. You can see it's more of a mimic of Apple, right? And Apple kind of mimic Android as well for certain functions that Apple system didn't have. So they were kind of mimicking each other. But later on, there are more different brands, especially of Android, because Android is an open source platform, right? There are more brands enter. For instance, Samsung, Sony, Motorola was still there, right? And there are more like Chinese phones, Huawei, ZTC, HTC, stuff like that. Okay, so as you see, it kind of, if you look at the smartphone, it was originally dominated by monopoly, started with Apple being the monopoly, but eventually now ended up with a more competitive form in which we have more many more producers, and the price, especially if you look at Android phones, the price is pretty competitive, meaning the markup level of price is not that high, right? So now look at the analysis. Here, this is what was in the short run. The short run is where it gets started, monopoly, right? It's more of monopoly. And we exactly follow the same as we did in monopolistic market, same analysis. So marginal cost equals to marginal revenue, and marginal revenue is lower than demand because the demand is of a certain level of inelasticity to a product, right? And in that, marginal revenue equals to marginal cost. That's what your production decision should be. And here we have the price, and we take your production into the average cost curve to find the total cost, which is a lower rectangle, and the difference is the profit. So you are making a positive profit, functioned like a monopoly in the short run, or to start with. But eventually, with many more firms entering into the market, Huawei, Xiaomi, Samsung, Sony, those kind of phones entering into the market, the demand is gonna be shifted down because those new entrants, they're splitting, taking away your market share, right? So demand shifted down, right? And become more elastic, if you will, because consumers, they have more close substitutes to switch to. You don't have to be hinged on your products when you were the only one, right? So eventually, as we have more producers, right, of similar feature to yours to enter into the market to compete with you, in the long run, the market will be the same as what we will observe for the long run perfectly competitive market in which all firms break even. So here, even though you still face you still face demanders with slight inelasticity, namely slight brand loyalty to you, right? And you're still doing your best by producing at the optimal production level, but the best you can do is break even. Why is that? Again, like competitive market, people are still going to be salty. There's still going to be a lot of investors who are looking into opportunities, right? If they see we can somehow still copy your pattern of profiting and seeing there is a profit, like in graph A, they're going to enter into the market to split your market share, to copy your success, and to take away your profit, to dilute your profit eventually to zero. So now, talking about efficiency, that's the only difference that monopolistic competition differs from perfect competition in the long run. In perfect competition, demand equals to supply. Demand is here, that's individual demand, intersects with supply, which is marginal cost. Right? Marginal revenue equals to marginal cost. So for competitive, in the long run, there is no deadweight loss. It's competitive equilibrium. It's efficient, most efficient. But here, for monopolistic competition, there is a deviation because you still try to lower down your provision in hope to push up your price. But even if you do that, the best you can do is zero profit, break even. But here, there is a deviation from, there is a squeezing down of supply, the quantity supply. There is a deviation from the competitive equilibrium. which is supposed to be supply, that's marginal cost, intersects with demand, that's marginal revenue or benefit, right? So this distortion or deviation result into this lost triangle of social welfare, that is deadweight loss. Okay. So even though they both have break-even solution, here in competitive equilibrium, in competitive case, there is no deadweight loss. In monopolistic competition, because of some monopolistic feature in there, distortion, squeezing down supply, distortion from competitive equilibrium, there is a deadweight loss. Okay, so here is the conclusion. Monopolistic competition, as its name, starts from monopoly, and due to no effective barriers to entry, because it's still easy for potential competitor to mimic, to produce close substitutes to your product, eventually we end up with competitive conclusion, which is that in the long run, all firms break even. And here, I supply to you a table that is a summarization of perfect competition, monopoly, monopolistic competition, and oligopoly, which is game theory. That's what we are going to be looking at for the remainder of the semester.